My name is Bruce Mattson. I guess you'd call me a jazz rock pianist slash Hammond organist. I play a great deal of both. It depends on the artist that I'm working with. Sometimes one fits the energy a little better than the other, and I might focus more on piano or organ. But in my own music and my own composition, I kind of split it 50-50 between the two. My background, well, right now I'm kind of known mostly for my New Orleans R&B funk sort of music in composition and in performance. New Orleans piano music uses all 10 fingers. It uses it pretty much all the time, just like classical piano. You know, you can play rock and roll piano with one hand, but this was a lot of fun to play as a solo artist and sort of goof off by yourself. At the time, really nobody around here was doing New Orleans rhythm and blues. These days, there are quite a few good pianists in this area doing that. When I started doing it, there weren't, and so it was a bit different and unusual at the time. Prior to that, though, I grew up. Originally, I was a guitarist for the first few years of my musical career, and then gravitated toward piano and organ in my 20s. When I first gravitated toward piano, I studied with a bebop jazz artist by the name of Fred Holovnia from Worcester, who's a very good player and used to play with Serge Shaloff and a few other well-known bebop artists. And I ended up playing in his big band. Fred had his own big band, and so my earliest jazz training was studying with Fred and the experience of playing the charts that he wrote for his own big band. And that was a trial by fire kind of thing as a young pianist. And then I ended up sort of taking an interest in, well, I was studying classical piano in parallel to develop the technique. To become a good pianist, you need to spend some time digging into the classical repertoire. You know, it amplifies everything that you do, all of the skills that you need. I ended up at the New England Conservatory, got a degree in classical composition. Didn't necessarily distinguish myself as the next great, contemporary classical composer while I was there. But the training that I received made me a much smarter and capable musician. And then it was, over time, I ended up listening to a lot of the New Orleans pianists like James Booker and Mac Rebennack, otherwise known as Dr. John, and Professor Longhair, and they were all very innovative players. I spent time as a member of the Greg Allman Band, so I was an Allman Brothers fan from a very early age. In fact, I have a song on the new album that is a tribute to Greg Allman and J-Mo, the drummer. I was a member of the Greg Allman Band for about 6 months, and for a couple of years off and on, I worked with J-Mo, one of the two drummers from the Allman Brothers, and loved the music so much, and I was so very appreciative of the opportunities they gave me that I took what I love about what they do, turned it into my own piece. You know? So that's on the new record. That's a song called J Train. I'm not a natural born singer. I've never been, and I never studied singing the way I should have. When I was I studied at New England Conservatory. When I was there as a composition major, I was required to sing in the conservatory's chorus and do some things like that. But I didn't take it as seriously as I should have. I wish I had developed that technique. And now I just sort of, when I need to sing, I just do it, and I should be spending more time with it. I was never like a really good classical pianist. I studied the work, because I was intent on being a pianist, and even as a young man, I figured I'd end up as a jazz pianist. So I never get nervous on stage. I've played in tiny little clubs, and I've played in arenas. Right? Never been nervous on stage in my life, except for the one time I was asked to participate in a classical performance, and I chose Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu, which is a notoriously difficult piece. But at the time, I was playing it all the time. I was playing it just fine. But it is a notoriously difficult piece. And oh my God, I got myself so nervous before the performance that there was my hands were doing this, were shaking. There was no way. So I sat down and I tried to start the piece, and I crashed and burned. It was the only time that's happened to me. But it was at that point I realized, okay, maybe classical piano, performance-wise, isn't your specialty. When we're covering something, we try to do something a little bit different with it, because it's not hard to replicate a recording note for note. That's not hard to do. You can buy transcription books and learn songs note for note and spit them back out again. And there's really not a lot of art to that, So we'll pick a tune that's part of the tradition, that's part of the repertoire, and we'll do something with it that maybe switches things up a little bit. Often that just happens spontaneously.
Joe, did you want to poke in here? No?
We don't necessarily sit around thinking about weird things we can do with these tunes. It just it'll happen while we're goofing around with things, and we'll say, oh yeah, that's an excellent way to hit that. Let's do it that way from now on. I have a couple of different methods for creating original material, and the one that I find the most curious, I guess the most interesting, is the fact that sometimes I'll hear something that really gets me excited and say, wow, I wish I had written that. So what I'll do is I'll have that song in my head, and I'll sit down initially thinking, okay, let me create something that's kind of like that, because that sounds like something I would enjoy playing, right? So rather than just covering that tune, let me take that and write something fresh, inspired by this, because I really dig it. So I sit down and I work with some ideas, and eventually a song comes out, and almost without exception, it bears no resemblance to the thing that inspired it, because it's been through so many filters and so many different tweaks and personal expression choices. So I get a kick out of that, because I can look at some of the songs that I've written and say, oh yeah, remember I heard this song, and it triggered me to sit down and work on it, and this is what came out. No, you'd never tell. My Crescent City Swagger album from a few years ago, that was all original. Very, very proud of that record. It holds together well, and there were some great pieces of writing on there, I thought. Collaboration creates end results that you'd never get working alone. I'm lucky with this particular ensemble. I'm fortunate to be working with some really great experienced musicians, guys that share my love of New Orleans R&B, but also have a lot of independent experiences playing in other things. Joe Potenza, the bassist, has his own jazz ensemble that does a lot of very creative, unusual arrangements of recognizable material, recognizable songs, but they do very quirky things with them. So, you know, he comes to this band having come from one of those rehearsals or recording sessions, and he's got all these crazy ideas, and that's so. But they're all like that, you know. Barry, the guitarist, and Dan, the drummer, they all bring all kinds of ideas from whatever gig they played this weekend into the rehearsal with them. And we're playing a tune, and somebody says, well, what if we traded solos here, and you solo for 16 bars, I solo for 8 bars, we'll work it down, some just wacky random ideas. You can't have all the ideas yourself because you don't know what you don't know. If you try to have all the ideas yourself, you're going to end up with a pretty sterile product in the end. And so if you collaborate well with others, it'll feel much more organic and much more human. I do what I do compositionally and performatively because I can't not do it, because it's just so much fun to do, and I feel so energized by it as I'm doing it that I just assume somebody else is going to get a kick out of it too and dig it and like it. If it's just a fun night out, that's enough for me, But if, like in the cases of some of these ballads where they come out of me deeply expressive, certainly I hope someone else might have a similar or equivocal reaction to the music as I have. I wait for something that hits me individually, and that's the stuff I go back to and listen to. There were pieces of music that I literally can't listen to without breaking out into tears. And so, what is it about those pieces of music that strikes me that way, that affects me that way? It's unlikely that it's going to affect a random cross-section of people that way. That's something that's personal to me for some reason, that I don't even really understand, and so my hope in terms of what a listener takes away from my own music is that someone out there somewhere at some time has a strong reaction to it that brings joy or healing or something like that to their lives. Tribute bands give me a little bit of anxiety because, let's say, I don't know, just grab one out of the thin air. Let's say you're a Tom Petty fan, right? What's the best way to pay tribute to Tom Petty? Is it to get some guys together and play his songs just like the record? Or is it to extract the things out of Tom Petty's work that really make you excited and transform that into something new and fresh, that's something they would, I think, truly appreciate. You know, if you're gonna play one of his songs in front of one of these guys and you think they're gonna be impressed,